Everyone in Ashcombe believed the vicar had no enemies. He had baptized their children, comforted grieving families, prayed beside hospital beds, and never once turned away anyone who knocked on his door. To the people of the village, Reverend Arthur Pembroke was more than a clergyman. He was the steady heart of Ashcombe, the man who always knew the right words when life became too heavy to bear. That was why the morning he was found dead, the entire village asked the same heartbreaking question. Who could possibly have wanted him gone? But Miss Marple asked a different question. Who was the last person to visit him? Because murderers do not always leave fingerprints. Sometimes they leave only a memory. Sometimes they leave behind a single conversation, a cup of untouched tea, or a visitor no one can quite remember seeing. And in the quiet English village of Ashcombe, one final visit would uncover a secret buried for decades, a secret capable of destroying lives, breaking hearts, and proving that even the kindest soul can unknowingly stand in the shadow of another person's desperate choice. So settle into your favorite chair, pour yourself a warm cup of tea, and join Miss Marple as she unravels the secret of the vicar's final visitor. The village of Ashcombe seemed untouched by the passing years. Nestled among rolling green hills, with winding hedgerows and ancient oak trees, it was the sort of place where everyone greeted one another by name and every cottage carried its own history. Roses climbed weathered stone walls, children laughed as they chased one another across the village green, and the bells of St. Edmund's Church marked each passing hour with reassuring familiarity. Life moved gently there. Predictably. Comfortably. Visitors often remarked that Ashcombe felt like a place where nothing terrible could ever happen. Miss Jane Marple knew better. After a lifetime spent quietly observing human nature, she had learned that evil seldom announced itself with raised voices or threatening faces. Far more often, it arrived politely. It smiled. It attended church. It shared afternoon tea. And then, when no one expected it, it quietly changed everything. Miss Marple had arrived in Ashcombe only 3 days earlier to spend a peaceful fortnight with her longtime friend, Margaret Ellis. Margaret's ivy-covered cottage overlooked the village green, its windows framed with lavender and climbing roses. The two ladies had planned nothing more strenuous than leisurely walks, knitting by the fire, and conversations over freshly baked scones. "I do hope," Margaret said one afternoon as she poured the tea, "that nothing exciting happens while you're here." Miss Marple smiled over the rim of her teacup. "My dear Margaret," she replied softly, "one should never assume that quiet villages are free from excitement. They simply hide it better." Margaret laughed, believing it another of Miss Marple's charming observations. She had no idea how true those words would soon become. That same evening, the village gathered inside St. Edmund's Church for the weekly evensong service. Golden light filtered through centuries-old stained-glass windows, painting gentle colors across the polished wooden pews. Reverend Arthur Pembroke stood before the congregation, his calm voice filling the ancient church with words of hope and kindness. He spoke of forgiveness, of compassion, of carrying one another's burdens. Several parishioners later admitted they had never heard him sound so thoughtful. Almost reflective. As though some private concern rested quietly upon his heart. When the final hymn ended, the villagers exchanged warm smiles before drifting home beneath a sky brushed with pink and amber. The Reverend remained behind to extinguish the candles and lock the great oak doors. Mrs. Eleanor Evans, who had tended the church flowers for nearly 20 years, waved cheerfully from the churchyard gate. "Good evening, Reverend. And a very pleasant evening to you, Mrs. Evans. You'll be home before dark, I hope." He smiled warmly. "I've only a few papers to finish at the vicarage. Don't work too hard." "I'll certainly try." Neither of them realized those would be the last words they ever exchanged. The evening settled peacefully over Ashcombe. Smoke curled lazily from cottage chimneys. A blackbird sang from the churchyard wall. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked before settling once more into silence. Margaret Ellis happened to glance through her sitting room window as she carried the teapot back to the kitchen. "Oh." She paused. Jane. Miss Marple looked up from her knitting. What is it? I believe someone's calling on the Reverend. Miss Marple walked quietly to the window. Across the village green, beyond the ancient yew trees, stood the vicarage. Near its garden gate waited a solitary figure. The visitor wore a dark overcoat despite the mild evening. A broad-brimmed hat hid most of the face. For several moments the stranger remained perfectly still, almost as though uncertain whether to approach. That's rather unusual, Margaret whispered. The Reverend rarely receives callers after evening service. Miss Marple watched without speaking. She noticed something Margaret had overlooked. The visitor repeatedly glanced over one shoulder, as if making certain no one had followed. At last, the figure stepped forward and knocked. Within moments, Reverend Pembroke answered the door. Even from that distance, Miss Marple could see surprise cross the clergyman's face. He clearly recognized whoever stood before him. For several seconds neither person moved. Then the Reverend stepped aside. The visitor entered. The door quietly closed. Margaret waited. I wonder who it could be. Miss Marple's eyes remained fixed upon the house. I cannot say. But I rather suspect. She paused. That whoever it is has come with something far heavier than ordinary conversation. Night gradually wrapped itself around Ashcombe. The lights inside the vicarage glowed warmly behind drawn curtains. One lamp remained lit long after most cottages had gone dark. No one saw the mysterious visitor leave. No carriage arrived. No footsteps echoed along the quiet lane. It was almost as though the stranger had simply vanished into the darkness. And yet someone had certainly been there. Inside the vicarage, 2 cups of tea rested upon the small table beside the fireplace. One would remain only half finished. The other would never be touched again. Neither cup would be discovered until the following morning. By then, everything in Ashcombe would have changed forever. Before dawn, Ashcombe awoke to something it had never known before. Silence. For more than 20 years, the church bell had rung faithfully every morning at 7. Its gentle chime was as dependable as the sunrise itself. Bakers timed their ovens by it. Farmers paused their work to listen. Even children walking to school knew the hour by its familiar sound. But this morning, the bell never rang. At first, no one thought much of it. The Reverend must have overslept, Mr. Collins, the village postmaster, remarked as he unlocked the post office. Mrs. Eleanor Evans smiled. Arthur? Oversleep? Not in 23 years. She carried a freshly baked loaf toward the vicarage, just as she did every Wednesday morning. The Reverend always insisted she stayed for tea before tending the church flowers. It had become one of those quiet traditions that no one questioned. The lane was unusually still as she approached the ivy-covered house. The curtains remained drawn. No smoke drifted from the chimney. She frowned. That's unlike him. Balancing the basket on one arm, she knocked gently. Reverend Pembroke? No reply. She knocked again, louder this time. Arthur? Still nothing. A curious uneasiness settled over her. The front door yielded beneath the slightest pressure. It had been left unlocked. Mrs. Evans hesitated. The Reverend was careful. Always careful. He would never leave the front door standing unsecured overnight. Arthur? Her voice echoed through the hallway. Only silence answered. She stepped inside. Everything appeared perfectly ordinary. His walking stick rested beside the umbrella stand. A Bible lay neatly on the hall table. The grandfather clock ticked steadily against the wall. Nothing looked disturbed. Nothing suggested violence. Yet the house felt strangely empty. As though its warmth had vanished. She entered the sitting room. The fire had burned itself out during the night. Beside the fireplace sat a small oak table. Upon it rested a silver teapot. 2 china cups. One cup stood empty. The other remained nearly untouched. Mrs. Evans paused. Arthur had entertained a visitor. She looked around the room. There were no extra coats. No hat. No gloves. Whoever had visited had already gone. But when a faint draft drifted through the hallway, she noticed the study door standing slightly open. Just enough for morning light to slip across the wooden floor. Something inside made her heart sink. Arthur. She pushed the door gently. The basket of bread slipped from her hands. The loaf rolled quietly across the carpet. Reverend Arthur Pembroke lay motionless beside his writing desk. His spectacles rested only inches from his outstretched hand. One hand still reached toward the desk, as though he had tried to steady himself before collapsing. His expression was peaceful. Almost asleep. There was no blood. No overturned furniture. No signs of struggle. Only an unbearable stillness. Mrs. Evans let out a trembling cry that echoed through the silent house. Within the hour, nearly the entire village had gathered outside the vicarage. People whispered in disbelief. It cannot be true. I saw him only yesterday. He looked perfectly well. Several parishioners quietly wiped away tears. Children clung to their mothers, sensing something terrible had happened even if they did not fully understand it. No one could imagine Ashcombe without its kindly vicar. Inspector Harold Bennett arrived shortly after 9 o'clock. A thoughtful man in his early 50s, Bennett possessed none of the dramatic flair often associated with detectives. Instead, he relied upon patience, observation, and facts. He removed his hat respectfully before entering the study. The village doctor, Dr. William Harper, had already completed a preliminary examination. Inspector Bennett spoke quietly. Heart failure? Dr. Harper slowly shook his head. I believed so initially. He glanced toward the body. But something isn't right. The inspector raised an eyebrow. There are no injuries. No. No struggle. None. The doctor folded his spectacles thoughtfully. But I found traces suggesting something far more troubling. The inspector waited. I believe Reverend Pembroke was poisoned. The words hung heavily in the room. Poison. Inside Ashcombe. Inside the home of a man everyone loved. Outside, news spread like wildfire. Murder. The word passed from cottage to cottage. From the bakery to the butcher. From the post office to the village inn. Ashcombe had become the scene of a crime no one believed possible. Miss Marple and Margaret Ellis stood quietly near the church gate as the police began questioning villagers. Margaret shook her head sadly. I simply cannot understand it. Arthur never quarreled with anyone. Miss Marple remained silent. Her eyes wandered toward the vicarage windows. Then toward the church. Then back again. Inspector Bennett approached politely. Miss Marple. She smiled. Inspector. I understand you've assisted the police in certain, unusual matters before. I've merely observed people. He nodded thoughtfully. Sometimes that's exactly what's needed. He explained the discovery of the 2 teacups. And no one remembers seeing the visitor leave. No. Curious. The inspector sighed. At the moment, we don't even know who visited him. Miss Marple's expression softened. I believe someone does. Oh. In villages, she said gently, people notice far more than they realize. Meanwhile, Dr. Harper examined the study more carefully. A leather-bound Bible remained open upon the desk. Beside it rested a handwritten letter. Oddly, only half the page remained. The bottom portion had been torn away. Inspector Bennett frowned. Was this done before or after his death? No way of knowing. The remaining words read, if the truth comes out, they will never forgive. The sentence ended abruptly. Nothing more. Who had written it? The Reverend? Or someone else? The missing half of the letter had disappeared. As officers searched the grounds, Constable Reeves called from the garden. "Inspector." Bennett hurried outside. Near the rear gate, partially hidden beneath damp leaves, lay a single black leather glove. Only one. The matching glove was nowhere to be found. Miss Marple quietly observed the discovery from a distance. "A single glove," Margaret whispered. What could that possibly mean? Miss Marple looked thoughtfully toward the narrow lane leading away from the church. "My dear Margaret. People rarely lose only one glove." She paused. "They leave one behind when they leave in a hurry." Then, almost to herself, she added, "Or when they don't wish to be remembered." As the wind stirred the ancient yew trees surrounding St. Edmund's Church, Miss Marple felt the first pieces of the puzzle quietly falling into place. Somewhere in Ashcombe, the vicar's final visitor was watching. And hoping the truth would remain buried forever, the people of Ashcombe had always believed they knew one another. They knew who baked the best bread, whose roses bloomed earliest each spring, and which families had lived in the village for generations. They celebrated births together, mourned losses together, and gathered every Sunday beneath the ancient roof of St. Edmund's Church. Now they looked at one another differently. With quiet suspicion. Conversation stopped when footsteps approached. Curtains twitched as neighbors passed. Every familiar face suddenly seemed capable of hiding an unfamiliar secret. Miss Marple had seen such changes before. "A murder," she once remarked, "does not create distrust. It merely reveals the distrust that has been quietly waiting beneath the surface." Margaret Ellis sighed. "It seems dreadful to suspect everyone." "My dear Margaret," Miss Marple replied gently, "one needn't suspect everyone. Only the person who has something to hide." Inspector Bennett established a temporary office inside the village hall, where one by one the villagers were invited to answer questions. The first was Mrs. Eleanor Evans. She repeated everything she had seen the previous evening. The Reverend seemed perfectly cheerful after the service. "Did he mention expecting a visitor?" "No." "Did he seem worried?" She hesitated. "Not worried exactly. But thoughtful." Thoughtful. As though something weighed upon his mind. Inspector Bennett wrote carefully in his notebook. "When you discovered him, what struck you most?" Mrs. Evans looked down at her hands. "The teacups. There were two. It felt as though someone had shared an ordinary evening with him. And then simply vanished." The next witness was Thomas Wilcox, the village gardener. He cleared his throat nervously. "I was trimming hedges near the church about 8:30. Did you notice anything unusual?" "I saw someone walking toward the vicarage." Inspector Bennett leaned forward. "Can you describe the person?" "Not clearly. It was getting dark." "Man or woman?" "I'm honestly not sure. The coat was long. And they wore a dark hat." "Did they leave?" Thomas frowned. "I never saw anyone come back." By midday the police had spoken with nearly 20 villagers. Every account was similar. Someone had visited the Reverend. No one knew who. No one saw them leave. It was as though the mysterious caller had disappeared into the night itself. That afternoon Miss Marple asked Margaret if they might take a quiet walk through the churchyard. "I've found," she said pleasantly, "that people often speak more freely outdoors." The old gravestones cast long afternoon shadows across the grass. Birds fluttered among the yew branches. Everything appeared peaceful. Yet Miss Marple's eyes missed very little. She paused near a narrow footpath behind the church. The earth was still soft from rain 2 nights earlier. Very faint footprints remained. Most had already been disturbed. But one impression caught her attention. It was unusually small. Not a man's heavy boot. A woman's sensible walking shoe. She smiled faintly. Interesting. Margaret looked puzzled. What have you found? Not proof. Only a possibility. As they continued along the path, they encountered Miss Beatrice Holloway, the village librarian. She appeared unusually anxious. Oh. Miss Marple. Good afternoon. You've heard about the Reverend? I'm afraid we have. Beatrice clasped her handbag tightly. He was such a kind man. Miss Marple noticed her hands trembling ever so slightly. You knew him well. For many years. He often borrowed books. What sort of books? History. Local records. Old parish registers. Miss Marple tilted her head. Recently? Yes. Only last week. And did he mention why? The librarian hesitated. He said. She stopped. What was it? Miss Marple asked softly. He said he was trying to help someone understand the past. The past? Yes. He told me. Her voice dropped almost to a whisper. Some old wounds cannot heal until the truth is known. Miss Marple thanked her kindly. As Beatrice hurried away, Margaret whispered. Do you think she was frightened? Miss Marple watched the librarian disappear around the corner. Not frightened of the dead. Frightened of the living. Later that evening, Inspector Bennet received surprising news from the laboratory. The poison had been identified. Not a rare exotic substance. Digitalis. A medicine derived from foxglove plants. In small doses it treated heart conditions. In larger doses, it became deadly. Dr. Harper frowned thoughtfully. Foxgloves grow throughout the village. In nearly every garden. So anyone could have obtained it. Precisely. The inspector sighed. So our list of suspects remains everyone. Miss Marple returned quietly to the vicarage. Inspector Bennet had given her permission to examine the sitting room. She stood before the small table where the 2 teacups still rested, untouched since the previous morning. She studied them for several moments. Then something caught her eye. The teaspoons. One rested neatly on its saucer. The other had been placed across the cup. Crosswise. Miss Marple smiled. A habit. Inspector Bennet looked puzzled. A habit? Indeed. The Reverend always placed his spoon beside the saucer. I've observed him doing so countless times. She pointed gently. The other cup was arranged differently. You mean? The visitor prepared their own tea. Inspector Bennet's eyes widened. So the visitor felt comfortable enough to help themselves. Exactly. Not a stranger. No. Someone who had visited before. Someone the Reverend trusted. Just as the inspector began reconsidering every witness, Constable Reeves hurried into the room carrying a small leather notebook. We found this hidden beneath the Reverend's desk. Inspector Bennet carefully opened it. Most pages contained ordinary parish notes. Baptisms. Weddings. Charity collections. Then, near the end, one sentence had been written in darker ink. If anything happens to me, ask about Eleanor House. Inspector Bennet looked up. Eleanor House. Dr. Harper frowned. There hasn't been an Eleanor House in nearly 30 years. Miss Marple remained unusually quiet. Instead of answering, she stared thoughtfully toward the church window. Because she remembered. Many years earlier, there had indeed been an orphanage called Eleanor House. It had closed after a tragic fire. Most people in Ashcombe had long forgotten it. Miss Marple had not. She spoke almost to herself. The Reverend wasn't protecting himself. He was protecting someone else. Outside, the evening bell finally rang once again. Its solemn sound drifted across the village. Somewhere beyond the churchyard wall, hidden from view, a lone figure stood listening. The notebook had survived. The letter had not. Which meant the murderer had overlooked one final clue. And for the very first time, Miss Marple believed she knew why the Reverend had been killed. She simply did not yet know by whom. The following morning, Ashcombe awoke beneath a blanket of soft mist. The church stood almost hidden behind the fog, its ancient tower rising like a silent guardian over the village. To most people, the mystery had only grown deeper. But to Miss Marple, the pieces were finally beginning to fit together. She sat quietly in Margaret Ellis's sitting room, knitting as though she hadn't a care in the world. Margaret had learned long ago that whenever Miss Marple knitted with unusual concentration, her mind was solving a puzzle. Finally, Margaret asked the question she had been holding back. "Jane, I believe you know something." Miss Marple smiled gently. "I know enough to ask the right questions." "And what are those? Why did the Reverend begin researching Eleanor House? Who feared the truth he was about to uncover? And why did someone tear half of his letter away?" She laid her knitting carefully in her lap. "My dear Margaret, the answer isn't hidden in the poison. It's hidden in the past." Inspector Bennet soon joined Miss Marple at the cottage. "I've searched every parish record," he admitted. "Eleanor House closed nearly 30 years ago after a terrible fire. Several records were destroyed." Miss Marple nodded. "Not all of them." She reached into her handbag and carefully removed an old newspaper clipping she had borrowed from the village library. Across the front page was the headline: "Orphanage Fire Claims 3 Lives." The fire, Miss Marple said quietly, was officially ruled an accident. Inspector Bennet studied the article. "But you don't believe it was?" "No. The Reverend didn't believe it either." Later that afternoon they visited Miss Beatrice Holloway at the library. She welcomed them nervously. Miss Marple spoke with characteristic kindness. "My dear Miss Holloway, the Reverend came to you looking for parish records." "Yes. He discovered something, didn't he?" Beatrice lowered her eyes. Tears gathered slowly. "I begged him to leave it alone." Inspector Bennet leaned forward. "What did he discover?" She whispered. "One of the children who died in the fire didn't die." The room fell silent. The records were altered. The child survived. But someone powerful arranged for the truth to disappear. Why? Because admitting the child survived would have exposed the real cause of the fire. Inspector Bennet frowned. "And what was the real cause?" Beatrice closed her eyes. "Neglect. The building wasn't safe. Money meant for repairs had been stolen." Miss Marple quietly finished the sentence. "And someone feared that if the Reverend revealed the truth now, a respected family would be ruined." Beatrice nodded. That evening, Inspector Bennet invited the principal villagers to gather inside the church hall. The atmosphere was heavy with uncertainty. Mrs. Evans, Dr. Harper, Thomas Wilcox, the postmaster, Miss Holloway, several members of the parish council. Everyone wondered why they had been summoned. Miss Marple stood beside the fireplace. She looked almost fragile. Yet every eye in the room rested upon her. "My friends," she began softly, "many believe Reverend Pembroke was murdered because of something happening in the present." She slowly shook her head. "They are mistaken. He died because of something that happened 30 years ago." A murmur swept through the room. The Reverend recently uncovered records proving that funds meant to repair Eleanor House had been stolen. The neglected building later caught fire. 3 innocent children were believed to have died. She paused. But one child survived. The room became perfectly still. The Reverend intended to reveal the truth. And someone believed that truth would destroy everything they had spent a lifetime protecting. Miss Marple turned slowly toward one member of the gathering. Thomas Wilcox. The gardener's face drained of color. Inspector Bennet watched carefully. Thomas tried to smile. There must be some mistake. Miss Marple shook her head gently. No. You worked at Eleanor House before becoming the village gardener. You knew about the missing repair funds. You also knew the Reverend had discovered the old records. Thomas's hands began to tremble. You visited him that evening. No. I saw someone else. Miss Marple smiled kindly. No one actually saw your face. But they all described the same long coat. The same broad-brimmed hat. And she reached into her handbag. Your missing glove. Thomas stared at the black leather glove recovered behind the vicarage. It matches the one you're wearing now. Slowly. He looked down. The glove on his left hand matched perfectly. His right hand was bare. The room filled with stunned silence. Inspector Bennet stepped forward. Mr. Wilcox. Would you care to explain? Thomas closed his eyes. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, his shoulders slumped. I never meant to kill him. His voice cracked. I only wanted the records. He refused to give them to me. He said the truth belonged to the families. I begged him. He wouldn't listen. I put the medicine in his tea. I thought it would only make him ill. Tears streamed down his face. I never wanted him to die. Mrs. Evans quietly wept. So many years. Thomas nodded sadly. My father stole the money. He caused the fire. When the Reverend discovered it, I couldn't bear the shame my family would suffer. Miss Marple looked at him with quiet sadness rather than anger. And so, you chose another innocent life. Inspector Bennet gently placed Thomas under arrest. No one spoke as he was led from the hall. Only the sound of the church clock echoed through the silence. Several days later, Ashcombe gathered once more inside St. Edmund's Church. This time, not for worship, but to say farewell. The late afternoon sunlight poured through the stained glass windows exactly as it had during Reverend Pembroke's final service. Miss Marple sat quietly near the back. She listened as villagers shared memories of the man who had baptized their children, comforted their grief, and carried their burdens without complaint. When the service ended, Margaret asked softly, "Do you think justice has been done?" Miss Marple looked toward the empty pulpit. Justice is a curious thing. The law can punish wrongdoing. But only truth can set hearts free. Outside, the church bell rang once more across the peaceful village. Its familiar sound carried over the cottages, the gardens, and the rolling green hills of Ashcombe. Life would never be quite the same. Yet the village had something it had lacked for 30 years. The truth. And although Reverend Arthur Pembroke had not lived to reveal it himself, his final act of courage ensured that the secret would never again be buried. Miss Marple adjusted her gloves and smiled gently as she walked down the church path. There is always one final visitor, she murmured to herself. The important thing is remembering why they came. The mystery was over. But in villages like Ashcombe, human nature would always provide another story. Thank you for joining me for The Secret of the Vicar's Final Visitor. If you enjoyed unraveling this mystery, please leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to know, at what point did you suspect the true culprit? And if you enjoy classic Miss Marple-inspired mysteries, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next cozy investigation. Until next time, take care, stay curious, and thank you for listening.